The torches burned low in the marble corridors of the Palatine Hill, their smoke curling like the whispers of the damned. Outside, Rome slept. Inside, its emperor was losing his mind. They say the night Nero first ordered the musicians to play again, it was not for celebration, but for summoning. He had killed her. Pompeia Sabina. His empress. His obsession. And as her last breath left her body, something inside Nero split in two, one half human, the other something else. For nights after, he sat beside her embalmed corpse, speaking to it, laughing, arguing, apologizing. The servants learned to keep their distance. The emperor's chambers smelled not of life but of rot and perfume, decay and devotion, perfectly blended. But power, real power, doesn't die with love. It mutates. It demands control over even the boundaries nature sets. Nero refused to accept that his empire could give him everything but her. So, he decided to take what even the gods denied him, resurrection. One night, during the spring games, he saw him. A young slave boy, no more than 14, standing in the torchlight, delicate features, soft amber curls, wide, doe-like eyes. For a moment, Nero's heart stopped. It was her. Or at least, what she could be. The boy's name was Sporus. He didn't yet understand why the emperor's gaze felt like both salvation and doom. Within days, he was taken to the palace, stripped of his name, his family, his body. Nero ordered surgeons, the same ones who once embalmed his wife, to make the boy into her. Every scar, every tone, every gesture had to be exact. The transformation was brutal, irreversible. When Sporus awoke, he was no longer himself. The mirror reflected the face of the dead. And in that reflection, Nero saw his empire reborn. He dressed the boy in the empress's robes, adorned him with her jewels, made him walk as she walked, speak as she spoke. Rome's elite watched in silence, afraid to breathe, afraid to question. That night, Nero led Sporus to the temple and performed a wedding ceremony, he, the emperor, she, the resurrected bride. Trumpets sounded. The empire bowed. But beneath the marble splendor and crimson silk, something monstrous had been born, not love, not grief, but the ultimate act of domination. What Nero did to one boy wasn't just madness. It was a message, a warning, of what happens when men believe themselves gods. By the time dawn rose over the Tiber, word had already spread through the city. The emperor had taken a boy as his empress. But in Rome, fear was stronger than disbelief. Senators bowed, priests offered blessings, and poets recited verses about a divine rebirth of love. They didn't dare call it what it was, desecration. Because in Nero's Rome, truth had become a luxury few could afford to speak. Nero's obsession with illusion seeped from his palace into the veins of the empire. Statues of the dead empress were remade, their faces subtly altered to resemble Sporus. Coins were struck bearing her image, now disturbingly close to the boy's. And soon, even the public began to forget what was real. That's how power works, not by killing truth outright, but by slowly distorting it until lies feel comfortable. At first, Sporus tried to escape within silence. The body may obey, but the soul always resists. Yet in Nero's world, resistance was treason. So he smiled. He learned to speak like her, move like her, even breathe like her. They say he walked the corridors like a ghost who didn't know whose shadow he belonged to. Every night, Nero would call for him. Dressed in white silk, Sporus would sit beside the emperor as he sang to him, love songs twisted into dirges. In his madness, Nero began to believe that he had outwitted death itself. That he had proven the universe bendable under his will. But deep down, he feared one thing, the moment the illusion cracked. Because behind every empire's mask lies the same truth, power is terrified of silence. That's why Nero needed music, pageantry, worship, anything to drown out the whisper that told him he was mortal. Rome became a reflection of that fear. The Senate applauded his crimes. The guards murdered at his command. The people cheered in the streets while starvation crept into their homes. And at the center of it all, Sporus, the living relic of Nero's delusion, became the empire's secret symbol. The perfect creation of control, beauty without voice, life without choice. This wasn't just about one emperor's madness. It was about the machinery of illusion itself, how institutions bend human souls into the shapes they require. Rome didn't just serve Nero. Rome became Nero. And by the time anyone realized, it was already too late. It started with whispers. Not from the Senate, not from the army, but from the marble itself. The palace walls that once echoed Nero's laughter began to carry a different sound, the silence of those who no longer believed. When lies grow too large, they begin to collapse under their own weight. And even the greatest illusions can't outlast the gravity of truth. The transformation of Sporus had become the empire's most grotesque secret. Servants avoided his gaze. Nobles watched him pass with forced smiles, terrified that pity might look like rebellion. Even the guards whispered behind their helmets, calling him the living ghost. At night, when Nero slept, Sporus would stare into the bronze mirrors and try to remember his own face. But memory fades faster than marble. He began to see her, the Empress, staring back. The same eyes. The same mouth. The same golden hair. And somewhere deep within, he realized, his body was no longer his own, but his identity still flickered beneath the surface, like a dying flame refusing to be smothered. Meanwhile, Nero's paranoia grew ravenous. He believed everyone around him conspired to destroy his divine image, the senators, the generals, even the gods. He ordered executions not for crimes, but for dreams. One senator was killed because Nero claimed he saw him smile too confidently during a performance. Another because he breathed too loudly near the Empress's statue. Rome bled in silence. The theaters became stages of worship, not art. The gladiatorial games, now drenched in theater, served one purpose, to remind the masses who held the power of life and death. Nero would make speeches about eternal beauty while his city starved. His words dripped with madness, but the people clapped, because obedience had become survival. And through it all, Sporus played his role, the perfect puppet carved from pain. Until one night, while watching Nero sing under torchlight, something inside him broke. He looked at the emperor, the man who had destroyed him, and felt not fear, but clarity. He realized that the empire was not built by gods, but by broken men pretending to be divine. That moment, that flicker of awareness, is the same moment every man faces when he sees through illusion for the first time. The question is, what does he do next? It was the eyes that changed first. The same eyes Nero once adored, wide, innocent, and obedient, began to harden. When Sporus looked at him now, it wasn't submission that Nero saw, it was recognition. The recognition of what he truly was, not a god, not a lover, but a parasite feeding on the illusion of control. And that recognition terrified him more than rebellion ever could. Nero's empire was already rotting. Gold-plated temples masked empty coffers. The legions whispered his madness behind their iron discipline. Even the Senate, those masters of hypocrisy, began to plot in secret. They'd seen emperors fall before, but never one who believed he could resurrect the dead. Still, Nero clung to his delusion. He made Sporus travel everywhere beside him, to the theater, to the games, to the banquets where he forced the elite to kneel before his divine bride. It wasn't love. It was surveillance. He needed to see her, or rather him, to keep the fantasy alive. Because without Sporus, there was only the echo of what Nero feared most, himself. But Sporus was changing. Slowly, silently. Pain had stripped him of everything, his name, his body, his will. Yet beneath that ruin, something stronger was being forged, awareness. The kind born from suffering so deep that it pierces illusion. He began to understand that Nero's power wasn't divine, it was psychological. Built on fear, repetition, spectacle, the same tools every tyrant uses to enslave not bodies, but minds. And here's where you must stop and think. Because what Rome did then, the world still does now: manipulate perception, rewrite truth, reshape reality until obedience feels like choice. Nero was just a prototype. The pattern survived him. It always does. Sporus began to watch Nero differently, studying him like one studies a disease. He learned his habits, his fears, his lies. For the first time, he no longer acted like the empress, he acted like a mirror. Every word, every gesture, every performance reflected Nero's own madness back at him. And that's when the cracks became fractures. Nero began to scream at shadows, accusing his servants of betrayal. He said the gods were whispering against him. He even accused Sporus of being possessed by Pompeius' ghost. The illusion was turning on its master. If you've followed this far, if you felt that same quiet awakening, comment below the phrase, "I see through the mirror," twice. Do it to mark the moment you stopped being a spectator, and started remembering who you are. The fire began where it always does, in the mind. Before the flames touched Rome's streets, they were already burning inside Nero. He had stopped sleeping, stopped trusting, stopped pretending. The once golden emperor now wandered his halls barefoot, his crown crooked, his eyes hollow. He whispered to walls, to shadows, to the corpse of his empire. But the thing he feared most was no longer death, it was being forgotten. Sporus stood by him still, not as a lover, not as a slave, but as a witness. The illusion was almost over. Nero could feel it too. Every applause now sounded like mockery. Every statue of him seemed to smirk. The senators who once groveled now looked at him like vultures circling a carcass. And through it all, Sporus remained, the living proof of what Nero had done, the embodiment of his guilt made flesh. Rome itself began to reject its maker. Armies declared rebellion. Provinces rose. Even the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's sacred shield, turned its swords inward. The illusion of divinity shattered. And what remained was just a man, shaking, bleeding, desperate to rewrite his own ending. In his final days, Nero clung to Sporus with a madness that felt almost childlike. He called him, "my beloved, my wife, my ghost." He swore the gods would forgive him if Sporus stayed by his side. But even that devotion was hollow, not love, but dependence. For tyrants, love is never real, it's merely another chain they use to bind the living. The night before his death, Nero asked Sporus a question, soft, trembling, pathetic: "Will I be remembered?" Sporus said nothing. Because he understood what Nero never could, that power built on fear cannot survive remembrance, only exposure. When the Senate finally declared Nero an enemy of Rome, he fled with a handful of slaves into the outskirts. The empire he once ruled now hunted him like an animal. Surrounded, cornered, abandoned, he looked to Sporus and whispered, "You must mourn me, as a wife mourns her husband." Then, with trembling hands, he pressed a dagger to his throat and drove it home. And in that moment, as the emperor's blood darkened the earth, Sporus did not cry. He simply watched, silent, expressionless, unblinking. Because when the illusion finally dies, there is no grief left. Only the cold, quiet clarity of truth. After Nero's death, the empire tried to erase him. His statues were torn down, his name scratched from marble, his songs forbidden to be sung. But memory, real memory, doesn't die with destruction. It lingers in the ones who were forced to live it. And that memory wore the face of Sporus. He should have been free. The monster was gone. The illusion had burned. But Rome wasn't done with him, because the empire doesn't simply kill symbols, it recycles them. The generals who seized power paraded him like a trophy. Otho, Nero's old friend and future emperor, took Sporus as his consort, the same way Nero had. dressed him again in royal silk. Called him Sabina. Whispered the same lies. The same delusion continued, only the name on the throne had changed. Imagine that. To escape the tyrant's grasp only to fall into the arms of his reflection. That is how systems of control survive, by replacing faces, not methods. And every empire since Rome has done the same. They don't need emperors anymore. They have institutions. They have narratives. They have algorithms. Sporus became a ghost moving through corridors of power, a breathing reminder of how humanity's hunger for control devours identity. Each emperor wanted to possess him, but none understood him. Because inside that fragile frame now lived the one thing empires fear most, awareness. He had seen power from the inside. He had lived as the illusion, the lie made flesh. And that knowledge made him dangerous. Rome wanted him silent. The people wanted him forgotten. Yet history, somehow, remembered his name, because his existence became the proof that control can only imitate life, never create it. But fate, like history, is cruel. When Otho died, another ruler rose, Vitellius. He too demanded Sporus's presence. But this time, there was no wedding. No gold. No delusion. Vitellius wanted a spectacle, a cruel joke for the crowds. He planned to throw Sporus into the arena dressed as a bride, to be ravaged and torn apart before Rome's eyes. And in that moment, Sporus finally chose the one freedom no emperor could take. He found poison, the same kind Nero once feared, and drank it. Quietly. Without spectacle. Without audience. His body fell, but his silence thundered louder than any speech. Because in the end, he proved something the powerful never understand, that when a man accepts death over obedience, their control dies with him. Look closely at history, and you'll see a pattern, a design hidden in plain sight. Nero was not just a mad emperor, he was a master of the oldest system in the world, psychological domination. He didn't just kill or command, he reshaped identity, twisted perception, and forced obedience through illusion. And the terrifying truth is this, the same strategies are alive today. Not in Rome, but everywhere you look, in governments, corporations, religions, even social networks. What Nero did to Sporus wasn't just cruelty, it was control. He erased a life, replaced it with a symbol, and demanded worship. The world applauded. The system survived. And you, like Sporus, are surrounded by invisible emperors. They don't wear crowns. They wear influence. They shape reality. They teach you to see the world not as it is, but as they want you to believe it is. Every institution that tells you who to admire, every story that tells you what to fear, every ritual that makes obedience feel like honor, these are echoes of Nero's empire. They bend perception, silence dissent, and normalize impossible illusions. And most people comply without thought. Most people never awaken. But you've been pulled down this rabbit hole. You've seen the emperor's madness. You've witnessed how identity can be stolen, reshaped, and exploited. And now you understand the choice Sporus faced every day, submit, survive, or awaken. You can choose the same today. You can see the system, name the lie, and step out of the shadow it casts over your life. So remember this, as you leave this story behind, power is never just taken. It's cultivated. It's maintained through fear, repetition, and spectacle. The real freedom comes not from fleeing, but from understanding the machinery that tries to bend you, and refusing to obey it. Comment the phrase, "I see through the mirror," twice. Do it to seal the transformation, to mark the moment you refuse to be the next Sporus, the next pawn in a grand illusion. Because knowledge without action is just another chain. And once you see through the mirror, you will never be the same. History is full of Neros. The question is, will you live like Sporus, trapped in someone else's vision, or will you take back your reflection, your mind, your life? This is the forbidden truth. And now, it belongs to you.